Welcome to this Fearless Security webinar on the duty to protect. My name is Fred Cohen and I'll be your speaker today. This is the outline of the presentation. In essence, before you can do your duty, you have to know it. And we're going to talk about how that works and why that works. And then we'll talk about how to do it fearlessly, and we'll be happy to entertain questions and discussions after that. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt are, of course, that's a phrase that's used to talk about how fear is used in security and elsewhere. I want to start with this example of a study we did some years ago for a U.S. Government component, a very substantial one, of need to know. And the interesting part about this study from a standpoint of duty to protect is that need to know decisions were taking months instead of days in this organization, sometimes 6 months. And the lack of access associated with people not having been granted the need to know access was debilitating. In fact, to the point where they were starting to be unable to perform their mission. The decisions were being made by the owners of the content on a case-by-case basis. It is, of course, their job to make those decisions, but the decisions were comprised of a complex set of factors that were very, very stressful. As an example, they were notioning, well, do I trust this person with this information? Do I know them? How close is the thing they're looking at to the specific data that I have ownership of? Do they really need this particular thing? And it was hurting them physically, mentally, and emotionally. And they didn't want to make these stressful decisions. And very often things were taking a long time for one reason or another. But what happens in these cases is that facts bring clarity. So what we did was an analysis of the duty to protect. And the duties to protect in government start, in this case, with the U.S. Constitution. And from the Constitution, various rights and responsibilities are delegated to different parts of the government, Congress, the president, the states, the court system, and so forth. And after doing this analysis, walking through the entire process, including all of the duties associated with the hierarchy of organizations, it came down to this. Need to know decisions should involve two and only two very specific criteria. One of them is, are they cleared to the level of the information? And that's a matter of fact. There's no opinion in it. The second one is whether access is required for some task that's authorized by the government. And it turns out that that's fairly easy to discern, right? If somebody is studying, shoelaces, they have to know about shoe construction, at least to the extent it affects the laces. And it's that simple. So at that point, the net effect was that they transformed the system to where access could be decided within a day or so and granted almost immediately. The effect, of course, was that they no longer had these long delays, and they were, again, able to perform their mission and operate as an efficient organization. So in that particular case, just this one set of decisions was enough to almost bring the organization to a halt, and fixing it by understanding the duty to protect solved the problem. So, as usual, we talk about what Fearless has as its duties, because we do the same thing that every other company does. We have to understand what our duties are in order to make reasonable and prudent decisions about protection. We, of course, have legal and regulatory duties, a standard business law in various jurisdictions where we work. We have special obligations associated with judicial orders because we do work in forensics matters and in legal cases, advising one side or the other, and have requirements for special confidentiality and so forth. And then there's the owner decisions. I'm the CEO, and effectively, it's my company, so I make the board level decisions. It's a privately held closed corporation, so that's very straightforward. We document the things that I decide we're going to do and follow them. We don't have any mandatory audits because of the nature of our business, but we do have select regular processes. So we do have external reviews that we undertake voluntarily, and we make decisions about their advice, but we're not mandated to follow it. Contractually, there are a variety of special confidentiality and use control requirements that we'll have to follow. And then there are de facto decisions, things we do because our decision makers decide to. And I'm not the only decision maker. So sometimes people make decisions, and whatever those decisions are, they create the duty to follow those decisions. course, we also track our duties on a case-by-case basis. We do different things. Basically, for special protective requirements like judicial orders, each instance has documented requirements that are kept with case-related information and reviewed by the people who work on it prior to initial access and on an ongoing basis as needed. If there's some judicial order that says this can't be revealed in this way, or this is allowed to be accessed by other employees of the company who signed the agreement, but this one is particular to an individual, then we have those documented and we follow them for those cases. And only the people involved in those cases have access to the information on the cases. We also have this overarching tracking. It's documented in contract language with workers, and at least every year they're reviewed as part of our internal assessment process. We have workflow processes and standard approaches that we use. For example, we have a metrics system that we use to assure that we're following our own set of rules. And of course, in our heads, general business law is something that management learns over time and tracks in their heads. And I certainly, tend to track these elements of business law as they change over time. So I want to go into the second part. So this is how we do our duty to protect and do it without fear or difficulty. I just want to move into how you can do the same thing. What we use is a standard of practice that we follow ourselves. And the standard of practice addresses how you prioritize the duties, how you analyze them, and how you track them. So, as I said, we apply our own standard of practice. Just so we have clarity, it's not a standard. That is not something that you follow, and it's not approved by some standard board. It's a baseline of practice. That is something you do. So, what the idea of a standard of practice is that it helps our experts, people that make decisions and have specialized expertise, to ask some reasonably comprehensive set of questions, to turn the responses into a defined language in a consistent way, so that to the extent possible, we're not making stuff up or using sort of terms of art inconsistently. It helps us guide decisions using predefined decision criteria and bases, but it doesn't force anybody to decide in any particular way. And it allows us to identify variances from the baseline. So we very often encounter situations where, for one reason or another, somebody shouldn't be following our baseline. They have a good reason not to do it. And if that's the case, we document it, and then we try to learn, right? When the baseline, when our standard doesn't apply, we try to adapt, not just for the individual customer or for ourselves, but we also want to figure out, if there's a reason for this, how we can codify that into the standard of practice for next time. So if there's a reason it won't work in some set of cases, and those set of cases are not so specific that it'll never happen again, then we try to codify it into the standard of practice so that we do better next time and have more clarity. The prioritization of sources of duties, we do 1, 3, 4, and 5 are fused together, and 2, and in that order. So we try to never violate laws or regulations. Our owner, board, and CEO, that's me, we're one and the same. And we decide, what we want to add to legal and regulatory requirements. And we only make contracts we can fulfill, and then we fulfill them. So to the extent that we have contract language that's specific to get some particular kind of business, that's tracked so that people working on that contract follow the slightly different rules. We use audits in an advisory capacity only, and we avoid, where we can, line management or conduct-defined duties. How are the duties tracked and used? Well, typically there are different ways to do it. You can do written form in documents, and we do this for special protective requirements only. You can do verbal and other informal means. We certainly try to reiterate duties in this form, but we only use that as a reminder. We wouldn't define them orally only, because we like to document our decisions so that we can support the fact that we made them and provide the basis. Email, websites, and other similar means. Certainly, we have this as a way to convey the duties. For example, on our website, you can get access to the information on what we are or are not willing to do with any information you provide us. So these are essentially policy matters that are defined duties. They're things that we've agreed to do. We also have an enterprise authorized database with workflows, and we use these for repeated processes, and we do metrics on them. So we measure the extent to which we follow these repeated processes, and we codify the duties into those processes. And then, we reiterate duties, but only as reminders in discussions, department meetings, and by conduct. We feel that's not a reasonable and prudent approach to defining duties, is that somebody just decides and they start to do it. We want to document it. Analysis of duties is another thing that you need to consider. There are basically three approaches that we take into account. There's the internal legal management related specialist. So it turns out, we advise others in a lot of these aspects, and we have a lot of folks that have specialized knowledge. So we certainly do this. We use our internal folks, and we support it with continuing education. And some of our team members have specialized experts in particular areas, and we leverage that to our advantage. Another approach is external specialists, and have them create a set of duties, and then the internal team reassesses the duty to protect as defined in the documented forms and makes decisions about it. And then, you should probably have external experts create and periodically reassess the duties. We tend not to do those two because we have internal experts specializing in the particular areas we work in. So, how does this remove the fear? Well, the fear comes from perceived threats and vulnerabilities, and it largely, historically, reflects uncertainty about the future. So, when we identify these duties and bring clarity to it, we sort of remove the uncertainty. So, a lot of people sort of think they have some duty or imagine that they have some duty they don't actually have. And if you codify it and make it clear, these are your duties and other things are not your duties, if you have questions, ask us. That, removes a lot of the uncertainty. You know what you're supposed to try to protect and what you're not supposed to try to protect. So by then codifying them in the various forms, we make it so that anybody that wants to can look and say, am I doing the right thing? And if the answer isn't provided in the written version, they can certainly ask. So they have an authoritative source for answers. And again, this avoids the uncertainty and doubt. And then, by regularizing these processes surrounding the duties, by having these repeatable processes and systems that help support workflows and such, we bring certainty in terms of process, and that reduces the likelihood of vulnerability, of errors and omissions, and of people not doing what they should do or doing things that they shouldn't do. You can sort of follow the checklist for the most part, and be reasonably assured that you're not going to do something you shouldn't or not do something you should. So then the next big question, of course, is how do you choose to carry out those duties? Because defining the duties doesn't tell you how to do it. And our approach is that risk management turns these duties to protect into the decisions. But we're going to be talking about that next month, in next month's webinar, which is risk management, concepts, and structure. Be happy to entertain any discussions. I'm going to turn off the recording now so that you need not fear having your questions and our answers revealed publicly.